I would say he's fallen under Putin's charm. And, I've seen it happen before to Western politicians, especially the German and Italian and French ones. Neither remind those names. But I think the fact that Secretary Rubio is there, and there's also Europe and Zelensky and everyone else, I think that's not a fatal flaw, but that definitely doesn't help the process.
Igor Novikov, this peace plan is a non-starter, isn't it?
Well, this particular one isn't, but I wouldn't call it a peace plan just yet because Ukraine will offer its edits, and then if the US accepts them, then the ball will be in Russia's court. So, but to be honest, I think the only realistic way to end this war would be to present something to Russia, as the final version that the US, Europe, and Ukraine agree upon. So, I think
Mm.
there are both positives and negatives in this.
Yeah, I mean, this plan, if you look at some of the proposals in it, shrinking the Ukrainian army, handing over Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, including territory that Russia hasn't even conquered, not having any long range missiles, holding elections in 100 days. I mean, the Americans have really given in to every one of Russia's demands, haven't they?
Well, I mean, we've seen it before. I think this cycle just keeps going on and on. So basically, Trump goes really tough on Russia. Then, when nothing happens, he goes really tough on Ukraine. That's his negotiation style. I would be very surprised if Ukraine actually agrees to the most ridiculous demands. So I don't think we are going to be handcuffing ourselves, to the door and waiting for Russia to strike again once it kind of regains its economic potential after the sanctions. So I think the most ridiculous parts of it will kind of die in the process. But once again, there's one major positive that I'm seeing, which is good, and that is that if the US and Ukraine and Europe agree on something, then Trump's focus will be on Putin again.
Right. So you need to present a sort of alternative plan in the hopes that Trump would get behind that and present that to the Kremlin.
Yeah, we need to find the middle ground, I think, even in this plan or whatever plan. I mean, I've seen like 4 or 5 versions in different media outlets. So
But
obviously
is there a
there's
middle ground?
um ending the war is because this war is at the moment is not winnable for either side. So that
Well,
definitely this war will end in the middle ground.
I mean, I'm sorry to say it, and I'm no armchair general, but it looks very much as if this war is winnable for Russia.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Like, first of all, there are two major factors in play here. One is there's a lot of disinformation at the moment, a lot. So, the factual information and what's being said on different news, on Telegram channels and everything differs quite a lot. But secondly, you have to remember this is a genocidal war. And, as we remember from 22, yeah, Ukraine might not be, some Ukrainians living, say, in Kiev might not be willing to kind of go to Donetsk and fight. But if Russian tanks start approaching Kiev again, everyone will be fighting again.
Mm.
So you have to remember that nuance. And I don't think this war is winnable for either side, at least,
Right.
at least without nuclear weapons.
Right, that's a big statement. I mean, just going back to the negotiations and the sort of germs of a peace plan that we're seeing. What do you make of the Trump envoy Steve Witkoff's role in all of this? Because his critics say that he doesn't really understand what he's getting into, that he's taking the Russian talking points. What do you say?
I would say he's fallen under Putin's charm. And, I've seen it happen before to Western politicians, especially the German and Italian and French ones. Neither remind those names. But I think the fact that Secretary Rubio is there, and there's also Europe and Zelensky and everyone else, I think that's not a fatal flaw, but that definitely doesn't help the process.
Mm. Keir Starmer has been quite clear that there should be no agreement on Ukraine without Ukraine involved every step of the way. Uh, Europe is sort of disengaged somewhat. And I wonder whether the corruption scandal that is engulfing Volodymyr Zelensky domestically is allowing the EU to pull back from the support that it's given to Ukraine?
No, to be honest, I would disagree with you. I would say that in the recent days, I've seen more kind of willingness to support and more proactive stance than in the month actually coming up to the scandal. Now, secondly, the scandal. What's most important to remember here is that once again, it's also being abused in the media, especially by the Russians, and you need to separate fact from fiction. So the fact is, yes, two of our ministers got fired and are facing criminal charges. Zelensky did not know about that. He fired them immediately. That's it. That's the end of the story. They need to go to jail. Full stop. You know,
But one of the people accused of
yeah.
corruption was very closely involved with Zelensky when he was a comedian in his TV production company. So those are pretty. You say these are the facts. Those are pretty big facts and pretty damaging to Zelensky, aren't they?
They definitely are, but I mean, I've seen this attack, for example, on his chief of staff. I mean, we haven't heard his name, we haven't seen any factual information, but there's everyone's now willing to dismiss him for some reason, and he's the guy actually in charge of the negotiations. So, like, look, I'm not a criminal prosecutor here, but I know Zelensky quite well personally, and one thing I'm willing to stake my reputation on is the fact that he's not corrupt.
Yeah, but if he's surrounded by people, ministers who are corrupt, that's a big problem for him, isn't it, in terms of weakening his position in these crucial negotiations?
No, it's definitely a problem, but I like the way he's handling it. You know, he's fired them quickly. They're facing criminal charges. End of story. And name one country where that isn't, a situation. Like nobody's perfect. Correct me if I'm
So
wrong.
do you think that the corruption scandal in some ways has been weaponized by pro-Kremlin forces online, that there's a kind of fake news operation going on to make it seem worse than it is?
Definitely, because I mean, this situation has been ongoing for a year and a half. You know, I'm no head of the anti-corruption body, but if it were my agency, that'd be arrested a year ago. That'd already be in jail, and that definitely I wouldn't be stretching it out over a year with domestic kind of propaganda happening. So especially during the war, so we need to separate the actual crime, and people need to pay for it from the context that's surrounding it. And a lot of people are interested in weakening Zelensky in this day and age, especially at this crucial stage.
How confident are you that the EU does still have Ukraine's back? They need to be involved in these discussions too, don't they?
They definitely do, because I mean, at the end of the day, if these discussions go wrong, or if the US takes Russia's side, the Europe is next. It's as simple as that. I don't think Putin will be discouraged from trying, to attack the Baltics or Poland or somebody else. So I think it's also Europe's war. But once again, as I said before, I'm not seeing any signs that Europe is stepping away. I'm seeing even more support than before.
Right. And you would agree with the French minister who said, if you don't tackle Russia now, your children, French children he was talking about, are at risk from Russia.
I think they are at risk from Russia regardless, to be honest. But, the level and magnitude of that risk and the price that will have to be paid in due course really depends on what is done now.
Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky are to have a call next week about this plan. Zelensky has been pretty measured in his response, pretty diplomatic, ready to work with the Trump administration, despite, on the face of it, quite a peace plan that is quite hostile to his interests. How do you advise him to approach that call next week?
I would say he needs to approach it the way he's approached Donald Trump over the last, 4 or 5 months. Because I mean, we're definitely seeing that cycle of his focus of attention shifting between Russia and Ukraine. He's trying to be hardline against one and then against the other. Now it's our turn. And Zelensky has done it before. Zelensky needs to convince him that it's Russia that's standing in the way of the peace process, and that Ukraine's pretty much willing to accept the same terms, and he needs to focus on Russia to get the peace that he so desperately wants.
So freeze the conflict along current lines. Do you think that could be a compromise worth making for Ukraine?
Well, as I said before, a few things. First of all, at this point in time, and with the prospect of potential future military aid, I wouldn't say that this war is winnable for either side. thousands of extra lives should not be and must not be lost over something that's not winnable. And I don't think either Russia or Ukraine can actually move the front line very far in the near future. So
Right. So
with that
that
in
does
mind,
suggest freezing it.
a bad peace is better than a good war, in my book.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, to be absolutely clear, that does suggest that you believe that perhaps freezing the line of conflict as it is an option that could be on the table or should be on the table next week.
Well, to be honest, I mean, let's examine two potential scenarios. One, we freeze along the current lines. Is there a victory for either side? No. I would say it's loss first and foremost for the US and for Europe. But regardless of that, lives won't be lost. If we don't freeze the conflict line, the best case scenario everyone's looking at is this war continuing along those lines, nothing changing, but more infrastructure gets destroyed and more lives are lost. What's the upside in that?
Igor Novikov, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.